Oh, you're right. Okay, we're back.
Okay, we are back.
And we're talking about work.
Work.
So, this week, we are talking about the episode Work. And it's one of those, I think it's one of those sleeper episodes where it's on the surface. It was just kind of like, oh yeah, that's a funny episode. But then as we watched it again and like started going through it and like coming up with verses and looking at articles and stuff, I was like, holy cow. So, but it's such a good episode.
There's a lot going on, a lot to unpack. And again, obviously you have Bandit playing with the kids, which is like 90% of the episodes is what it feels like, is just a dad playing with his kids. And it's funny how as you watch it again, you realize when he says, oh, work. He's played work before.
This is not a new game.
And he knows that work does not go the way he wants work to go. Just like Hospital or just like other games that they have names for.
It makes me wonder though, like, what is this always the way that the game plays out? Or is it like there's different iterations of work? Like they do different, do they always sell drain pipes, or is there different,
Is he always kicked out of the house?
Does he always end up on the front doorstep without a job? You know, is Bluey always take over his job from, you know, what are the different, I don't know. I feel like it's the way he said, oh, work. It's like he knows something's coming, but what does that mean?
I think he constantly lives in hope that the work won't be because like he's like, this is a dancing work, and they're like, nope, no, it's not.
You
oh,
make drain
okay,
pipes.
boss. Nope, you're the boss. Oh, okay. And it's very much the game's gonna go how Bluey wants the game to go, because Bluey is a little bossy, and he just plays along with it.
And Bingo's a frog, and she's just having fun.
And Bingo's a frog. Bingo is like God in the episode. Watch it again, and see what I mean by that. Not that she's like a goddess, but like she acts sometimes how God does, I think, in our lives. We'll see. But it's an odd episode. Bandit has to do some rather humiliating things. You know, he's cleaning the windows with his bum. Like stuff like that, and gets kicked out of the house. But Bandit even says, why are bad things happening to me?
Yeah.
And it's that.
And I think that the question is, it's why do bad things happen to good people? Why do good things happen to bad people? You know, I feel like it's that at some point, and sometimes it's earlier, sometimes it's later, but that question, our kids are going to get faced with that question. And the concept of fairness, where our 6-year-old right now, I feel like we have a 4 and a 6-year-old. And so there's, no, 5, and she's just turned 5, sorry. But we've got 5 and 6. And so it's that fairness. She got more than me, or she got this. Well, I want, you know, and she's had this longer than I was able to play with it. And like, we're starting to get into that. What does fair look like? And I feel like this episode kind of touches on that, where it's he didn't do anything wrong. You know, Bandit didn't do anything wrong. And he got fired anyway. And starting to kind of introduce to our kids here, and you know, they started asking about, like, why did that happen? And it's like, you know, sometimes bad things happen to good people. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily because he did anything wrong or you will do anything wrong, but it happens, and it's gonna happen. And I was reading one of the articles that I found was from American Scientist, and it was a neurologist, and she was talking about a study that they did, and kids who were acknowledged when they would say that's not fair, when their parents or their teacher would say, you know, life's not fair, that as they got older, their moral compass, their justice compass was very much more blasé. like life's not fair, so it, injustice doesn't really matter. Whereas kids who, when they were younger and would say that's not fair, and their parents or their teachers would acknowledge, and even if it wasn't something that could be changed, if their parents and their teachers acknowledged it and helped them work through that this isn't fair and this is why and how to respond to that unfairness, they were, as they grew up, better suited. they acknowledged injustice more. They saw injustice, and then instead of just walking by it or turning a blind eye to it, were actually able to acknowledge and able to see that injustice and then respond to it in a healthy way. And I thought that was really interesting, because that's how many times that it's like, that's not fair. Life's not fair. Like, that's the immediate, like, life's not fair. Well, it's not. And that's okay. That we're seeing that. But how we respond shouldn't be, well, life's not fair. Get over it. It should be, okay, yes, life is not fair. And you're gonna get fired when you don't deserve to get fired. People are gonna tell lies about you and that aren't true, and your friends are gonna believe it, and it's gonna happen. And how you respond, this is the important thing. It's
yeah, and it's part of it is listening to their side of the story.
Yeah.
And that helps with kids. But also part of it is working through it yourself. And it's I remember my first real job, and I like real job, like a W-2, like I was hired, like went through interview processes, and I get hired, and a few weeks after training, I get fired. I get let go. It was let go due to budget cuts that happened that summer for the first time ever in the institution's history. And I was one of the most recent hires, and all the new recent hires got the axe. And I was like 18 years old, and this was like my summer job before college, and I was like excited, and then I'm let go. And I'm like, but it was, it was as impartial a firing as you could have. Literally, it's an institution-wide budget cut. All new hires are let go from every department. Like, it wasn't just me, which helped a little bit. But still, it's like this, like, that's not fair.
Yeah.
And it threw off my summer before college, and everything kind of had to change. And in hindsight, my whole, because I was gonna go live on campus and do all this stuff, all my plans got shifted. And in hindsight, it wasn't actually a bad thing. Yeah. Even though to my 18-year-old self it was a blow. And it was like, oh my goodness. But you learn to work through it and realize that saying life's unfair doesn't mean the world's out to get you.
Yeah.
And there's a way to teach people that unfair things will happen, that someone might be on the side of the street selling toilet paper tubes because their kids kicked them out of the house at a game. And you shouldn't judge that person and think that life's punishing them.
Yeah.
And so there's a way to handle that. And I feel like the episode did a really good job of that.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like it also touched, though, on, bad things happening to good people. But I also feel like that it touched a little bit on this, we have dreams, that I dreamt of running a dancing work at one point, and there's sometimes that doors close that we don't understand why they closed, and they should not have closed. This door should not close, and they do, and the whole trajectory of our life gets thrown off. But sometimes I feel like that happens. One of the pastors that I was listening to this last week, she said, here in America, the saying goes, when God closes a door, he opens a window. But she was talking to a man from Greece, and he said that when he grew up, that the saying wasn't God opens a window. It was when God closes a door, he opens two more. And I was like, oh, I'd always heard, God will make another way, but it wasn't, that there's potentially more options. There's better plan. There's something else better, and I thought I thought that was an interesting, I thought that was an interesting, like, difference in how.
Well, it's funny because I'd not thought of God closing a door and opening a window in the sense of the window being like a secondary or not as good of an option, like a smaller option. Like the door closed, but there's a window you can crawl through. And instead it's, well, one door closed, there's two more doors that you can walk through. And I had not thought of that before as like a qualitatively different thing.
Yeah.
And are we demeaning God by saying he's opening up an escape window,
right,
as opposed to a fully fledged door?
Exactly. So it's and I feel like that's a large part of, and it's hard. It's really, really hard when the rubber meets the road, and you're in that situation. But when a door closes, when you get fired, when something bad happens, when we got the news that we couldn't have kids, it was devastating. And we went from, here's the trajectory that our life is going to be on and this is what we're going to do, to all of a sudden David sold cars. Like he worked at CarMax selling cars because he needed a job. And it was through that kind of a strange, weird turn of events happened. And our life was like, we had it planned. We had the 5-year plan, 10-year plan, 50, like we had it planned out. And some decisions were made that ended that trajectory of our life, where our schooling was stopped, and essentially what our plans were, we were told you're no longer allowed to keep going in this direction, and it was devastating. We ended up moving back home to where, to Oklahoma, where we're from, and David started selling cars, and it was like, God, what are we supposed to do now? What do we do? And recentered ourselves, and then started working forward as far as where do we go from here. And God started opening doors and showing us a completely different course of life than what we had ever imagined.
Yeah, and not the doors that we would have picked.
Not
like literally doors. I would have applied for 2 jobs at the same time, and we would have thought one job I'd be a shoo-in for, and the other job would have been completely foreign, and the completely foreign job calls me back and offers me the job, and then the other job was like
doesn't even call it
crickets
back. Doesn't even call back.
And so it was funny how the doors that were getting open were like, okay, I mean, we're gonna go with the one that is offering me the job.
But it was he's had the call to teach for a while. Like that's been one of the calls on David's life, and knew that was something he was supposed to do. And come to find out, he was being able to teach people, but it was in a completely different setting than what we thought it was going to look like. And so sometimes I feel like it's, okay, God closed a door, and after, a few different things happened, I'm glad he did. Opportunities have come up, and we have progressed a lot, but not in the way that we thought was going to happen. And God has opened a lot of doors that we never expected, but putting limits on what God wants us to do, I feel, or not even limits, but I was listening to Bob Goff.
I was going to say, you mentioned about the podcast.
Mr. Mr. Thacker and Bob Goff, and they were talking about
not constraining yourself by your ability.
Not constraining yourself by your ability. And man, the podcast this last week, Bob Goff's podcast this last week, was like, it was really good. It was really good. You need to listen to it.
I know, you could tell me that.
I told him like 5 times.
But one thing you told me about was I think the guy Bob's interviewer talking with was saying that one of the hardest things for him was not judging himself based on where he thought he should be in 5 years and 10 years compared to where he actually is, because his life has changed so much that if you try to compare, well, 5 years ago I thought I'd be here XYZ, and instead I'm on like 1, 2, 3. It's just completely different. And I feel like we're in that same boat.
Yeah.
And that's not bad.
It's not bad.
And part of it is things are going to happen outside of your control and outside your kids' control that won't be bad. Now, in hindsight, they might seem devastating, but in the long run, and I still vividly remember this. There was a guy I'm working with. He's a chef. He's engaged to a girl. He's in the Navy. She ends up dumping him, John Doe kind of thing, writes him a letter, and he's devastated because he thought we were soulmates and like all this stuff. Come to find out, like, life happens. He moves on. He ends up getting another girlfriend. This is a couple years later. He meets the guy who married his former fiance at a store, walking through the store one day. And he sees him. He's like, "Oh, hi." He goes like, "Hi." He's like, "How's it going?" And the guy's like, you don't want to know. And he's like, "Oh." And he's like, "Yeah." I think they were divorced at that point and stuff. And he's like, you dodged a bullet, man." And he's like, "Huh." And it was those sorts of things are going to happen.
Yeah.
And walking your kids through unfair things is going to happen, but not all unfair things are bad.
Yeah.
So that's one thing to keep in mind. Now, like in this case, he gets fired from his job and all that stuff, and only in hindsight do you see that. Right.
Yeah.
And that's not all bad things, but I think that some of those fall into that category.
But that's where trusting God comes in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where teaching our kids that, we're going to walk through life. We're going to do what God is, and God's going to lead it. We believe that God leads us. We believe that if we pray that he directs us. Jeremiah 29:11, we believe that he has a plan, and it is a good plan. But we also want to teach our kids that it may not be our plan. And this plan that going forward, holding on, there was a chaplain's wife that I've been talking to, and she made the comment, and I loved it, because I was like, okay, what if this station, and what if this changes, and how do we, and she's like, well, one of the things that we have adopted the saying is that we hold on with open hands. And I love that, because I never want what God gives us of anything to not be able to flow through us. And if I'm like this, then God can't move through me. And so that's something that we've really been trying to teach our kids in our changes in life and our season of life changing, is that, it may not be what we planned, but we believe that God is working through us, that he will lead us and he will guide us, and that, if we hold on with open hands, then he's gonna flow through us, whatever that looks like, and it's gonna be okay. But if we're holding on to something, if we're holding on to God, it's gonna be okay. Mm-hmm. Because wherever he takes us is gonna be with him, and it's gonna be good. But if we're holding on to a place, or if we're holding on to a job, or if we're holding on to, and we're being led over here, and we're holding on over here, it's going to feel like we're getting torn apart. And so we're with moving and with job changing and everything happening right now that it is for us, it's holding on with open hands so that God can letting God move wherever he directs and wherever he leads.
Yeah. And one thing that I think you mentioned this was not only do bad things happen to good people, but also, of course, good things can happen to bad people.
Which is also really hard.
It is hard because you see someone, you're like, that they didn't deserve some of the stuff that they're getting, and it's like. But then I thought of the verse from Matthew. He said, God makes the sun rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. Yeah. Like, you're gonna see some people who are what we'll call blessed, and you think, but they're lying and backstabbing to get ahead and things like this. And then you're going to see someone who's doing all the right things and yet they can't seem to get ahead, and you're thinking, what's wrong with this picture, or what are they doing wrong? And it's like, no, like, you're going to see things like that. And that's why I don't believe in karma per se, but I do believe in God. I know that God does work all things for good, even though it doesn't feel like it. And we know that God does have good plans for us. And that's part of trust. And I think that walking our kids through that, and especially when they can see something that's unfair, and encouraging them to keep looking for those things, not because you can write all of them, but maybe you can write one.
Yeah. And
I told you, I said, okay, so I think Bingo's the hero. The frog's the hero of the story. Because all the frog does really is kind of listen to Bluey a little bit and then dance a little bit and get him fired. Because the frog's the one who ends up dancing with him. But then the frog's the one that goes and finds Pavlova and orchestrates it all.
Yeah.
And it's like, if we could be like little Bingos, little frogs, and try to help write something, then we're on the right path.
Yeah.
And it's not every day I'd probably tell my kids to act like a little bingo frog, but like if we can plant that seed in of when you do see something that you can help.
And I feel like you said about comparison is the thief of joy. And teaching our kids now that we live in a social media society. We live in a very facade society. And it's easy to get caught up in, they have this and why did they get that and how did that and why, and comparing when we don't have a clue a lot of the time what's going on behind the scenes. We don't have a clue a lot of the time what that person's internal and spiritual and new people who had it all going on the outside. It looked like everything was great, and then come to find out they were in a tremendous amount of debt trying to make that facade happen. And when it came tumbling down real hard, because it was all fake. And teaching our kids too that you can't compare, because you don't know what other people are going through, that it will steal your joy. And if you're on the path that God is leading you on, then he will direct your steps. And that's going to be the place of peace. That's going to be the place of, you're going to be a lot happier there. And even if it doesn't, and that's what's hard is like, and we've talked about, when we were told that we couldn't have kids, and then it felt like everybody we knew was being able to have kids, and literally people who did not want to have kids, and like, we're not, it's hard not to judge, but like, shouldn't be having probably kids at this stage. We're gonna be having kids. And it was really hard not to compare when it's like, I'm about to start IVF here and y'all are getting pregnant easily and it's not real fair. So, there's definitely times that it has been very difficult. But it's still knowing that if we walk through the path, if we walk the path that God is laid before us, if we go through the steps that he puts in front of us, that it will be better than trying to walk in somebody else's steps or walk in somebody else's shoes.
Mm-hmm. And there's something I think that Bob Goff's wife says to him a lot, and it's keep your eyes on your own paper.
Yeah.
And it's that it doesn't matter what you're drawing versus what the other person next to you is drawing. You're drawing on your piece of paper, and they're drawing on theirs, and your life's going to look different than them. And then somebody else had said, the only time to look at someone else's bowl is to make sure there's enough food in it. In other words, don't compare how much you have with someone else unless you're looking to see, do I need to give you some of what I have?
Yeah.
And if I can get those habits, if I can do this myself, but also if I can get my kids to do that, I feel like kids are naturally generous when you allow them to, especially when it's not theirs. Kids will easily give away everything you have. And that's probably not a bad thing. It's harder for us, and I feel like Jesus says it a lot, like it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to have to become God. It's because they hang on to stuff, because stuff has them, and they're holding on to stuff tightly. And it's that. Wow, this took a detour, but I'm going to stick on it. So it's that, and it's encouraging kids to keep that. And it's going to be hard because it's going to stress you, the parent, out more than it is the kid. But it's that trust that the kid has in their parents, and hopefully that I have in God, to help right some of those. So when I see somebody on the side of the street, not to judge them, but to try to help them.
Literally this morning, we were driving through town, and somebody's on the corner with a sign, and Lenny was like, what are they doing? And David said, well, they're asking for money. And she's like, well, you have money. And he said, yes. And she's like, are you going to give him your money? It's like, we're driving past. We're not getting, she's like, you can turn around. Like she was.
And she said, and she was so polite. She would be like, may we give you some of our money? She was going to ask them very politely.
Ask them if she could give them some money. And it was like, baby, we can't give money to every single person on the corner, because we kept seeing people.
And then she's like, yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
And then Sophie, our second's like, no, we can't.
Oh
my gosh.
Sophie was like, we can't give everybody money. Then we wouldn't have money. And it was like, but we have enough money. We could give some away. And like them trying to talk through, should we give every single person on the corner like some money? And it was so sweet. And so like, Lord.
So convicting.
It was so convicting, because how many times do I look down, or how many times do I try to look away instead of looking at the person on the corner and feeling that conviction to give and to help the person on the corner. And it was a little bit convicting.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that if you encourage kids' natural want to fairness, that's really good, and that will help them have a strong moral center. Because then, even if they're facing something that is literally impossible to change, they still have the idea that there is right and wrong, there's wrong, and there is.
Well, and it was also not just to see right and wrong, but it was also so that when they were in a situation where they could make the choice of doing right or wrong, or doing something that would be a little bit more fair, that it was that center where it was like, they didn't just see it in other people. It was acknowledging that when a child sees something that isn't fair, it actually helped instill in them that I need to be more fair. I need to do the fair thing in this situation. And so it wasn't just like noticing it happening to, this is racism, this is sexism, this is, all of these different things that we see in the world around us. It was also, I'm not being fair with what I'm doing. And creating that internally as well, which I thought was, yeah. let's instill some more of that in our kids.
Yeah.
And just by, it's so easy. Like, it was such an easy, it's literally just by acknowledging, that's not fair, and then acknowledging it and working through it instead of life's not fair.
Instead of dismissing it.
And it's that the little things. And I it's something that's so important. And every episode, every time that we're, reading these parenting books that we are, and it's these one little sentences, these one little things, and yet it can make this world of difference in our kids and how they process and how they move forward.
Yeah.
So
we're past time because we got carried away.
A little distracted there.
But good episode.
Great episode.
Tell us your thoughts, and then we'll pray and close it out, and we'll be back next week.
And if there's anything we can be praying for you guys for, please let us know.
Yeah.
So we can be praying for you guys too.
Yeah. Father, we thank you for this time, for this opportunity to hopefully encourage other parents and help us to be better parents as well, and to be better models of what justice and fairness looks like. Help us to encourage the things that you've planted in their lives, and help us not to get disappointed when things in our life change as well. But as Morgan said, like to hold on to things loosely so that we can be holding on to you tightly. In Jesus' name, amen.
You guys have a great week. See you next time.